Hey game makers, Pixelated Pope here, and welcome to the first episode of my new series, GM Anatomy, where I plan to explore the inner workings of GameMaker and give you tips and tricks for exploiting these intricacies. In this episode, we're going to explore Boolean values, comparative operators, and conditional statements, and how the way they work can be used to compact your code dramatically. For example, check out this code. That probably looks pretty familiar to most of you. You've probably written something similar to it before. But what if I told you we could reduce all of that code to 2 lines? If that blows your mind even a tiny bit, keep watching and we'll explore how that's possible. In programming, regardless of the language, you always have values. In other languages, there are dozens of built-in value types: Boolean, byte, int, double, float, long, string, the list goes on. In GameMaker, however, we really only have 2 types of values: strings and reals. Of course, reals are just numbers that you can do math with, and strings are a collection of characters. But then as you are reading the documentation, you come across something like this. Keyboard check and many other functions built into GameMaker returns a Boolean type value. But as I just said, GM is all numbers and strings, so what's a Boolean? I hope most of you know the answer to that already. A Boolean value means either true or false. But I wasn't lying when I said that GM only deals in strings and numbers, so what does it really mean for something to be true or false? Again, you've probably already figured this out, but the keyword true is literally just the number 1, and the keyword false is literally just the number 0. You can replace any true anywhere in your code with a 1 and it'll still work. The opposite is also true. You can go through your entire code and anywhere you use a 1, it can be replaced with the keyword true and it'll work the exact same way. Same with 0 and the keyword false. So let's look at that code I showed earlier, specifically that first if check. So if keyboard check returns a quote-unquote Boolean value, that means we are getting either a 1 or a 0. So during execution, if the right arrow is being held, that line of code would technically look like this. And if it isn't being held, it would look like this. So if 1, the code below the if statement is ran. But if 0, the code isn't ran and any else code would then be executed. But are 0 and 1 the only acceptable values in an if statement? Let's set up a little experiment in GM. I've created a new project, added a new object, and put an instance of it in a clean room. I do this a lot to experiment with how things work in GameMaker, and I encourage you to do the same whenever you aren't really sure exactly how something is working. In the create event of the object, I've added this wall of code. All this code is doing is running an if check on several different numbers, and using showMessage to tell me which result we got. Let's run this and go through each if check to find out if the number is considered to be true or false, and then see if we can find some sort of pattern. Okay, so immediately we see that 1 is true, as should be expected, and of course 0 is false. Next up is 0.5. That is also considered true. So maybe 0.4 is true as well? Nope, 0.4 is considered false. Negative 0.2? Also false. Negative 1? False. Now the complete opposite direction with 50.67. True. So when it comes to if checks inside of GameMaker, any number less than 0.5 is false, and any number greater than or equal to 0.5 is true. So either GM is comparing every number to 0.5 directly, or rounding the results of the expression in your if check and comparing it to 1. That means that every if statement you write like this really ends up looking like this. If the expression following an if keyword is always resolved to a number and then compared to 0.5 to determine whether it's true or false, what about an if statement like this? We are using one of the many comparison operators to compare our current x value to the number 15. If we write that out like we expect GM sees it, it would look like this. Just like our keyboard check function, using a comparison operator resolves to either true or false, or more specifically, 1 or 0. So if our x does equal 15, the line would look like this. And if it didn't equal 15, it would look like this. Even just using a comparison operator results in a number. What's really cool is that behavior isn't limited to the inside of an if statement. So how can we apply this? Let's say you have a variable called timer, and you want timer to count down by 1 every step, but you want it to stop counting down at 0. You might have coded that like this: if timer greater than 0, timer minus minus. Another way to do that might be to take advantage of the max function. Timer equals max timer minus 1, 0. And both of those will work, but there's another way to do it using what we just learned. And it looks like this: timer minus equals timer greater than 0. So if timer is greater than 0, then you will subtract 1 from timer. But if timer is less than or equal to 0, you will subtract 0 from it, which doesn't change anything. This is a great shortcut for keeping your code more compact, but we can go even one step further. Alright, back to the code I said we were going to reduce to 2 lines. As you are coding, keep an eye out for these really basic if checks, a single check with a single value being set or changed as a result, because they can almost always be simplified and made more compact. Let's simplify it one step at a time. First, let's get rid of all the ifs. Multiply the result of your keyboard check with the walk speed and add or subtract it to the x or y value as appropriate, like this. So if right is not being held down, keyboard check will resolve to a 0. 0 times any number is 0, and x plus 0 is still just x. But really the only difference between the first line and the second line is the button being checked and whether we are subtracting from x or adding. So this is easy to combine by subtracting the results of our VK left check from the results of our VK right check and multiplying the whole thing by walk speed. And the same can be done for the y values, subtracting up from down. Now that we've got all that code reduced to 2 lines, let's break this down so we understand exactly what is going on. Let's say left is being held and right isn't. The top line looks like this: x plus equals 0 minus 1 times walk speed, which results in this: x plus equals -1 times walk speed, which can be further simplified to this: x plus equals negative walk speed. So the object would move left at a rate of walk speed. This also handles another situation you've probably encountered. What happens if both left and right are being held? That would look like this: x plus equals 1 minus 1 times walk speed. 1 minus 1 is 0. 0 times walk speed is 0. X plus 0 is no change at all. So the object wouldn't move anywhere since left and right cancel each other out. So hopefully you have a better understanding of how Boolean values, comparative operators, and conditional statements work within GameMaker. And maybe you've got a few ideas for how you can apply them in your current project to make your code more compact. That being said, code compactness should not be the ultimate goal for you as a coder. As always, your code should be easy for you to read and work with, and being more comfortable with your code is always going to be more important than making it more compact just for the sake of reducing your line count. And one more word of advice. Even though technically Boolean values are numbers, I don't recommend using them interchangeably. Use the keywords provided by GameMaker as they are appropriate. This will help keep your code precise and readable. Finally, I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of my subscribers. I just hit 1,000 this last weekend, which is a huge milestone for any YouTuber. So thank you so much for subscribing, liking the videos, and commenting. It really means a lot to me, and I hope I can continue to make videos you find interesting or helpful. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for other aspects of GameMaker you'd like me to explore in detail, let me know in the comment section below. Thanks again for watching. Now go make something awesome.